everyone, and welcome back to Full Recovery. Today, I have the honor and privilege to interview my friend, Julie Dominguez, and we're going to talk about some heavy subjects today. Of course, if you know anything about the Dominguez family, you know that 6 years ago, their daughter Megan went to heaven, and the trial that they endured and they faced as a family has been one of the grace and mercy and peace of God at work in their heart and in their lives. And the verse that I think of when I think of Julie is Proverbs 31:25. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. And so many times we look at the trials that a person has gone through and we think, well, that's different than what I've gone through. But the grieving process that we all go through can be equated to any of our trials. We all face different things, but we all face grief. And today we're going to talk about that subject a little bit, and many others too, how to let God bring peace and grace to your life in the midst of difficult circumstances. I hope you'll take the time to watch this program and maybe write down the references that Julie recommends, things that have helped her. I know I gleaned a lot of good information and help from listening to her talk about what God has done in their lives. Enjoy, and I'll see you at the end. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. We're here in the home of Julie Dominguez, as I mentioned in the introduction. Julie is a friend of mine, and from the moment I set out to start this YouTube channel, I wanted to have the chance to interview her and for all of you to get to know her. And of course, we have many mutual friends. But for some of you that don't know her testimony, today will be eye-opening. For those of you who do, I hope it's a strengthener and encouragement to you to maybe get some details that you maybe hadn't heard before. Before we get into the interview, we want to pray and ask God to bless what we're doing today. I know Julie personally, and I know she wants to give God the glory for everything He's done in her and through her. And of course, with this channel, seeking ultimate full recovery from things that have bound us and saddened us. We want to have God's help with that. I don't know any help for dealing with recovery outside of what God can give. So let's have a word of prayer and we'll get started. Dear Heavenly Father, I do thank you for Julie, for her family, what they have meant to me personally and to our family. And I thank you for her testimony. And Lord, I know she doesn't see herself as a great champion of faith or parenting or anything, and yet that's how I see her, and so many others see her as well. And I just pray that you'll use her testimony today for your honor and your glory. In your name we pray, amen. So welcome to Full Recovery.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to ask Julie to take a minute and tell us about your family.
Okay. Well, I'm married to Jessie Dominguez, and we've been married now for 26 years. Our anniversary was January 29th. And we have 3 children. Our oldest, Megan, who's in heaven now. And then Nathan, and he is 21. He turned 21 in March. Can't believe that. And then Lauren is our youngest, and she's 12. And she'll be turning 13 in July, which I cannot believe that.
It's amazing how fast these years have gone by. When we first, of course, Julie, we knew each other in college. Our husbands were very close in college. We're all very close. But we didn't really start getting to know your kids until they were a little bit older. And Lauren was a baby, 8 months old, when I met her for the first time. And now she's
I know.
so grown up. You mentioned Megan, who is in heaven, and we're coming up on the 6th anniversary of her being in heaven. And can you describe her for us? Just tell us anything you'd like for people to know about Megan who didn't know her.
Sure. Well, I could, talk forever. But even from the time she was very, very little, she was very, very bright, very excited about life from the time she was very tiny. Very bossy. I always try to tell this story to someone when I'm explain Megan's personality. So she was probably, I want to say, 2nd, 3rd grade at our school that they were going to when we lived in Arizona. And I was teaching at the time and helping at the school, and it was recess time. I happened to there was other teachers on recess duty, so I was in my classroom, then came back out, and she was literally standing all by herself, and she had the whole rest of the grade school facing her at attention, and she was giving them all instructions in how they were going to play this game, and she was, and she was the leader, so from the time she was very little, she was always a leader, always friendly. She loved people. As she got older, she loved to cook. She could, at 10 years old, go in the kitchen and she'd say, "Mom, can I try and make something?" And she'd grab ingredients and she'd come up with something amazing. She was really good at that. She loved to bake. Of course, she loved photography. So, which is, I've carried that on. That's another story, but just very talented in so many ways. Loved volleyball. I think the biggest thing that I would want people to know about Megan, though, is that she loved Jesus. And it was just very, very evident. It just came out, and she loved people. She loved to win souls. She wanted to make a difference with her life. And she woke up every morning ready to tackle the day. She wasn't a complainer. She was an encourager. And she was a lover of people, a lover of God, a lover of nature. She was the kind of person that took everything in. She didn't want to miss out on anything. And I think anybody that knew her would be able to, nod yes to all of the things that I've said about her. And, she was just a good example. And, if I could grow up to be like her, I would be the happiest person. That's really, truly how I feel. I don't know how I got her as a daughter, knowing who I am and, my faults and my failures and our home, and it's not perfect. And I know no home is, but that God allowed us to have her for 16 years. It was truly, truly a blessing. Of course, I wish we had her longer, but God chose not to. But I think, that would be the biggest thing, is that she loved Jesus, she loved people, and she loved life.
Can you talk a little bit about her spiritual walk? I know you mentioned she loved the Lord and loved speaking up for him, but what avenues did she serve him in, and then how did she connect with God personally? Sure. If you can talk about those things for a couple of minutes.
Sure, I'll try and be as brief as I can on this. In Arizona, she was around, I'm not going to probably get the ages completely correct, 11, 12-ish. And she was really, that's when we were making the decision whether to move. So still the preteen years, didn't really, I feel like, appreciate a walk with the Lord or anything like that at that time. When we made the move, we moved to Kansas temporarily, and we lived with my in-laws for a year. And we attended my husband's home church. And she was accepted at first by some of the girls in the church, but then when I think they saw her stand for Christ and her stand for her modesty and her convictions about boys and all those sorts of things that teenagers have to face, they treated her horribly. So this is not an exaggeration. We would come home from almost every single church service and she was crying and upset. But at that time, I know that is what pushed her towards Jesus. She would come to me and cry, and we would talk things through and pray, and I would give her, advice and counsel. But I know that is the year where she realized, I need the Lord even more. And it took off from there. She, if we went on trips, you would see her gazing out of the window, and she was always looking up at the sky. And if you look at any of her old Instagram posts and things, she would take a lot of pictures of the sky because she talked to the Lord, that she talked to Jesus all the time. And she, so I know that she was always aware of him in her life. I think that was probably the biggest thing. And I think that's what gave her that confidence to stand up for what was right, because she was aware of the Lord in her life in every single area, not just when people were watching, God was real to her.
Mm.
I would see her at night. She liked to read her Bible at night. She was a night reader, but I would see her all the time reading her Bible at night. She loved to sing, so she would be playing music in the room and, hear her singing out loud to the Lord. She just, she had a relationship with him, and it was very evident. So, yeah. I don't know if that answered, but yeah.
It does. What do you think? It's hard when you're raising kids to put the brakes on yourself as far as fixing their problems and controlling all of the circumstances. I mean, sometimes I've even known people to manipulate circumstances and people, to try and make things perfect for their kids. And that doesn't help them. We know that. But when on those nights when she would be crying herself, to sleep or just crying, talking to you, do you remember what she would say? And did she say anything in those times that would indicate that she was giving it to Jesus, or that she was, and I know you encouraged her to do that. What were her thoughts? Did she ever express anything during that time about giving her hurts or her cares to the Lord?
As far as expressing it verbally to me, I feel like it was more, that time together was more of her being able to really just open up and express her hurts to me. And then, of course, I would lovingly try to help her. And there were a couple of times where, honestly, I'll tell you that my husband and I did feel the need to kind of intervene and get kind of step in and help out in some situations, which is a whole other story.
Right.
But I do know that if you were to look at her, like I said, she looked up to the sky a lot. If you look at her old Instagram posts, she wrote a lot about let go and let God, and about the song, I have decided to follow Jesus, no turning back. Though no one join me, still I will follow. She would put little one-line quotes in different posts on Instagram, and different little notes in her Bible, like in Psalm 139, where it talks about, my mind's kind of gone blank, but I have it right here. But where it says, search me, O God, and know my heart, try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And in her Bible on the side, it said, needs to be my everyday prayer. So there were evidences of her allowing God to use those circumstances to work in her life to make her better by just those types of things. And I'm sure there were moments where she would express something like that to me. I can't right at this very moment think of anything specific, except for what I just mentioned.
I think those notes in her Bible speak to where her heart was and what her thought process was. And I don't want to make, I don't want to glamorize, Megan was a teenage girl.
Oh yeah.
She was a bit, but she was not a typical teenage girl in the sense that we think of that, because sometimes that brings a negative connotation.
Right.
And, I knew Megan, and not, we didn't live near each other, so not in that sense of seeing her every day in my home.
Right.
But I knew her well. She was friends with our youngest daughter, friends with all of our kids. Thought they were friends with her. But Amanda was especially close to Megan. And seeing the influence that she had on Amanda, I know she had a strong relationship with the Lord. And I think that is evidenced by those notes in her Bible. What a tribute to her and a testimony to her faith that God could handle any of that. As we mentioned in the beginning, we're coming up on the 6th anniversary of Megan's homegoing to heaven. And as I mentioned, we've been friends for a long time. And so the night of May the 4th, I was working on a picture board for a lady in our church who had passed away a couple days before. She had no children. Her name was Florence Duckworth. Isn't that the best name? And I loved her. She was a tiny little lady. But anyway, I was working on a picture board for her funeral, which would have been on the next day, Monday the 5th. And I remember that you texted me about 1 o'clock in the morning and said, please pray for Megan right now. So I did. And a little while later, I got so tired working on those pictures, I fell asleep on the floor of our living room. I woke up to another text, I think around 3 or 3:30, that, we need a miracle. And then the next thing we heard, and after that, I didn't go back to sleep. The next thing we heard was Joe got a text on his phone that she had gone to heaven. And of course, just stunned to hear that, because here's a girl in great health and the prime of her teenage years, and God chooses to just very quickly, to us it seemed, take her to heaven. Can you tell a little bit, whatever you're comfortable telling, about the events of the previous weekend and then her homegoing?
Sure. So like you said, Megan was always very healthy, and especially in the last, around age 14, 15 especially, she was very interested in eating healthy and being healthy. So she was very healthy, very active, very athletic. She loved volleyball. She was on the volleyball team at school. Anyway, so that, I would say a week or so before everything happened, she just had the normal stuffy nose, just kind of feeling blah, for a few days. She kind of had a little bit of a cough and things so it didn't really progress into anything horrible, at least while, she was home over that week or so. So on Friday, the weekend before she passed, she woke up that morning and she was getting ready for school, but she was just really not feeling well. And I tried to talk her into staying home, because I just felt like she just needed some rest. And but she had some big tests that day. There was a big volleyball game, and she's like, "Mom, I don't want to miss all of that. I'll have to make up the tests. I don't want to miss the game." So of course, she went to school, and so in the course of I would say mid-morning, I got a call from the school nurse. She said, "I have Megan here in the office, and she's complaining of just not feeling well. I took her temperature. It was just slightly, a little bit higher. It wasn't hardly anything." And she said, if I were her mom, I would just send her home, but I'm going to let you talk to her. So she put her on the phone. I talked to her, and she's like, "Mom, I just really want to stay." She said she gave me some medicine, so the medicine will probably help, and I'll probably be fine. So she ended up staying. And then that night she had a volleyball game, and my husband went to the game. I can't remember why I didn't go. I did not go to the game, but my husband did. Brought her home afterwards, and she was just exhausted. And just remember her going to bed. And then Saturday morning, my husband and I were up, and we were downstairs, and she came down and she said, "I don't feel well." And just a few minutes later, it wasn't even minutes, it just happened so fast, but she said, "I think I'm going to faint." And so Jesse got behind her and under her arms, and she fainted, and so we set her in the chair, and I'm just panicking, because I've never seen her do anything like that. And so she fainted, but came right back to, but she was kind of a little bit shaking, and I thought, this is not good. Of course, I immediately called 911 and all of those things. So ambulance came and took her to the hospital and ran several tests, and it came back that I think she, at that day, tested positive for one of the flus. I can't remember now which one it was. Sent her home, and said she's just a little dehydrated, and you fill this prescription, and if she's worse, you can bring her back in. So, brought her home, and she seemed to kind of perk up a little bit. But then during the middle of the night on Saturday, when she went to bed that Saturday night, we told her, if you need to get up in the middle of the night, we don't want you going, if you have to go to the restroom or anything, do not go downstairs by yourself. You come to us first, and we'll help you downstairs, because we were worried that she would faint again. So she came to our room, and she woke us up, and she said, "I think I'm going to faint." She fainted a little bit. We took her downstairs, and I stayed up with her all night, and she began vomiting, and ended up taking her to the hospital on Sunday. My husband actually went to church, but came back right after Sunday school. We took her to the hospital, and she was weaker. they decided they were going to admit her, and there were different signs. I don't want to give all kinds of details because I may get some of them wrong as far as heart, blood pressure and her heart rate. One of them was elevated or low, and I can't remember which one it was now. But they ended up admitting her, and they said, you know, she has the flu. We'll, you know, give her IV fluids and she'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And so they basically put us in a room, give her IV fluids, and kind of just left us there. Mm. And she just progressively became worse. She started having severe stomach pains, and it would go to her back. And I was trying to get help to come to the room, and I felt like the nurses were just dismissing it as its flu symptoms. Yeah. I'm not sure about the exact timing and everything, but around 11 o'clock or so, 11:30 at night, a new nurse came on duty, and she was my angel. I say a little too late, I guess, but she came in, and right away she noticed there was something definitely wrong, and she said, I will go get the doctor and I will drag him up here if I have to, you know. So she came in, and after that moment, everything happened so fast. I felt like one moment I was all alone, and the next the room was full of every kind of doctor you could imagine. And they were trying to give her, you know, fluids, take blood. They were testing all kinds of things. And I'm in the room, but I'm standing over to the corner because I didn't want to leave. And my husband it was just such an odd day because that day was City Baptist graduation, and my husband was to be on the platform for that day. So he went. And when he did leave the hospital, Megan was, you know, still not feeling well, but she hadn't digressed, or is that the right word? She hadn't gone down at that moment. So he thought, I'll do the graduation, I'll be right back. Well, in the process of him being at the graduation, and then it happened so quickly. So I called him, he came right away. And but I just remember, I'll never, you know, be able to unsee this, and I don't want to ever unsee it, but you know, Megan she looked over at me, and it was just a look of fear, of mommy, help me, what's going on. It was just this stare that I cannot describe. And I just remember whispering to her that, you know, everything will be okay. And I honestly at that moment thought that, oh my goodness, finally all these doctors are here. Yeah. It's going to be fine. They're going to figure it all out. And so that's why I said that. I truly believe that. And then
I remember you telling me she called you mommy, and she really hadn't done that recently. Yeah. She was older, and, you know, she went to mom. Yeah. But when she called you mommy, I remember you saying how that just gripped your heart. Yeah, she did. And they asked me to leave the room to answer a couple questions. And then I came back in, and I was standing in the doorway, and they had oxygen on her, trying to help her breathe. And the next thing I know, the doctors are saying, you know, Megan, you need to breathe, And then that was it. And then I heard them say, you know, starting compressions. And I was like, what in the world are you talking about? What are you doing? You know, I just, and at that time, my husband had just gotten to the hospital. So he didn't even get a chance to really see her, you know. And so they ushered us out because they were going to be working on her. And after that, it's kind of a blur, honestly. I remember calling my parents, I think, and trying to tell my mom what was going on. I know my husband called his parents for them to pray, and went to a waiting room. And I don't know how many hours we were there. I don't know. I just remember doctors coming in and talking to my husband and I, and them just saying, you know, we've done everything we can. Her heart will start beating, but then it goes away. It just flutters, and then it goes away. And they said, we've done everything we can. And so they were asking us to give them permission to let her go. Wow. And I just remember staring at the doctor, just thinking, are you kidding? I mean, it's so hard to explain and express the emotion. Right. But I mean, we both, obviously, we said yes.
you can stop. And so they did. And I just remember, walking back to see her, and it was the toughest thing, hardest thing. It was tough.
It's a difficult thing because, we both have a mutual friend who, of course, John and Linda Wilkerson, who lost their son in a car accident. Some people lose children to cancer or illness, but when you're not prepared for something like this, boy, it can really just upend your whole world overnight, in an instant, really. I remember thinking in those first few hours, my first thought was, how am I going to tell Amanda and Joey too? They were both still at home, and I just thought, how on earth do I tell them? Because the last thing they knew, we were praying for her because she was dehydrated and had the flu. And then my next thought was that I think the world has just stopped turning. And of course, we're not relatives, and I was not her mother, and for me to feel that, I can't even imagine what it was like for you to feel that. And of course, I believe so strongly in the power of someone's testimony and how that can uplift and strengthen, encourage. For someone who says today, okay, I've never lost my child, but I have dealt with some hard things. Some times of grief and struggle. What are some things in those early hours and early days that people did that were a help to you or an encouragement to you?
Well, the biggest thing is prayer, and I think we belittle that.
Right.
I really do. I literally remember moments where I just felt strengthened, and it had to have been because of people praying for me, So I definitely believe that prayer is the biggest thing, or was the biggest thing, still is the biggest thing. But then, how, and I'm so guilty of this too, we'll say to someone, let me know if I can do anything for you. Just tell me anything. I will do anything and so we leave that up to the person that's hurting to reach out for the help when they're in so much pain, when they're hurting themselves. Maybe they can't even think straight enough to know what they actually may even need. I don't know if that makes sense, but especially in the early hours, the early days, just people showing up and just taking charge of things, not charge of our lives, but of things that just kind of made common sense, like to help with the groceries. Meals, because I didn't want to eat. I didn't eat for barely for days, it seemed like, but just having that there, and then just so many people just coming. They didn't say, can we come over, or do you need company? They just showed up. They sat on the porch. At the time, we lived with my parents when we first moved here, and I know you know that. So we lived with my parents for, I want to say, about 3 years when we first moved here. I believe that's how long it was. And so we were still living with my parents when all of this happened. And so people would just come. They would drive all the way to Crete, Illinois, from, it's a good 30 minutes for most people or more, just to sit on the porch with us. And sometimes we didn't really even say anything. We just sat. And they didn't even say anything. They just sat there. They were just there. The physical presence of a friend. And I think that was so huge. And I have, a couple of friends that took me out shopping because I needed something to wear for the funeral. And my sister-in-law helping me choose the clothing for Megan, for it to go through. How do you even do that? So my sister-in-law, she didn't ask if I needed company. She just was there. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned from that. And I'm not always perfect at it, is just do. If it's on your heart to do for someone, just do it. Don't ask. Just do. And so just being there, showing up, even if you are uncomfortable, with the situation. I know that I'm sure that over the years I've had friends that just didn't really know what to say, if they should say anything. Do I say Megan's name? Do I bring up a memory? All of those things. But the people that just were real and just showed up and was just there, that was huge for us and still is. Yeah.
The book of Job talks about how for 7 days he had the best friends anybody could ever have, because they were 3 men that came and did nothing but sit. Yeah. And just their presence was a help to him. And then, of course, we know what happened. They couldn't, once he started needing to verbally exhale, they couldn't take it. Yeah. And they just had to start instructing him. And we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes, but how long was it before you started to feel, and I hate to even word this question this way, but I think everybody will know what is meant by this, but how long did you feel, or did it take you before you felt that you had a normal day? Right. A day that wasn't so grief stricken, and just a general amount of time, or if you have a specific memory tied to a normal day. About how long do you think it took you?
I don't know if I have any specific memory of a specific day, and that's a really hard question to answer. For me personally, because of our living situation, and we were with my parents at the time, we didn't have our own place. We didn't have our own thing. All of our things were in storage. I think that played a huge role in us really even being able to begin to function as a family, our own family. And I'm very thankful for the time that we had with my family, and so grateful that they let us live there for that long. Who does that? But anyway, but I do feel, I'm sure in those 3 years, in the time after Megan passed away and us living with my parents, I'm sure I had some days where I felt okay. But I think my days of really feeling like I could learn to live again in a new normal way is when we moved into our own place. And we had to learn, because for the very first time, it was only 4 of us. And it wasn't 5. It wasn't my parents with us. It was just us. So I feel that once we were able to have our own home and really see the dynamic of what a 4-person family is now and what it really feels like, that's when I feel like that's when I was able to start healing in a sense, and getting and finding what a new normal could be for us, for me as a mom of 2 children now instead of 3, and setting a table for 4 instead of 5. Right. And there are even, just recently there are days where I'll grab, 5 forks, and it'll still make me cry. Yeah. It doesn't always, but there's just moments, but I do feel that, once, like I said, once we were able to get our own place and know what our family could be as a family of 4, and learning it all with each other, that's when, I feel like there was some kind of normal, a new normal, if you will. I hate the word normal, but I know what you mean. It's hard not to use the word normal when you're asking that question, but the new normal, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that it's years sometimes. I think that, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to, come on, you should be feeling better about this. You should be farther along. I for myself, I do that. Right. You should be farther along than this. Right. What's wrong with you? And I think, we hear so often, time heals all wounds. It's just not true. God is the healer of the wounds. But as time goes on, you know, it is a balm to think, okay, I made it another day, and I didn't pack it in. You know, and I think when we do go through hard times and struggles, we have to be very aware of our advancements and not so aware of our drawbacks and our, you know, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. We have to really focus on the 3 steps, that one extra step we gained, instead of falling so far behind and thinking that we'll never catch up. Every day you live in a loss like that, to me, is an advancement. And we need to cut ourselves some slack in those areas.